your server would have fetched or would have sent you with an entirely new page. But in a asynchronous terminology, because I clicked on this, if I click on this, it immediately takes me to the required part. It does not change anything else. It does not change any content on the left hand side. Neither does it change anything on the other parts of the page. It only changes that it only brings up that I have requested. I haven't requested the entire page. I've just requested only the documentation part for this setEngine method. So asynchronous does everything behind the behind the scene, but it only requests, or it only changes the part of the page that has been requested by the visitor or the user. It does not change. It does not change the entire page, or it does not tell the server that you need to send me the entire page. It only tells the server that, Mr. Server, I only require the documentation part for this example. I require that, Mr. Server, I require the documentation part for this crypto.setEngine method. So please send me the documentation part. So the server actually receives that small request, which is relatively small if we compare to a request sent by a synchronous method. So the server receives that request, which actually asks the server to send only the documentation part for this method, and then the server calculates that it will only need to send in the content, because the page is there, or the template or the HTML template is there. All the other content will stay the same, so it does not require any new pages to be sent to the browser. So it only tells the browser that, Mr. Browser, here I have the documentation. Please show this to your user, or change what is required on your HTML template. You don't need to change everything on the page. So that's how a synchronous technique works. But in synchronous form, your browser, if you click on it, if I click on it, your browser, the browser would actually start loading, which means it has sent an entire request, which is a big request in terms of file size, or in terms of request size. It has sent a big chunk of data, telling that, Mr. Server, my user has requested this. Mr. Server, my user has requested a new page. It does not tell the server that, Mr. Server, my user has requested only the documentation part. In synchronous terminology, your browser would request the entire page, so your server would send in the entire page. So that requires a lot of time, a lot of response time, if compared with the synchronous technique. So we were discussing about this readFile method and the callback function. Now, this callback function does something special to this asynchronous function. So this is one of the synchronous function, and if you wish to use a synchronous type of function, then you can head over to readFile sync. This sync actually means synchronous, and if you don't see anything included, like a sync name for if you don't see anything like sync included in the name of any method in Node, then you always consider them to be asynchronous methods or functions. So this readFile method, we will use this readFile method to call in a file. We will use this readFile method to call the JSON file that we have just created, or the database replica that we have created. So let's do that, and I'll be explaining what this callback is, what this callback will do once we get this method right. So I will call in the file system object, then I will call the readFile method, and from this readFile method, because the first argument that we are looking at is the file name. So our file name is known as featured underscore content dot JSON. So let's write that, featured underscore content dot JSON. So we pass in the file name, and because it's in the same directory or it's in the same relative path, that's why you don't need to include anything or any sort of relative path to this naming convention. So we just add the name, and then the next thing that we need to do is there is another type of there's another argument that we will have to include, which is the options. So this argument will tell the server, and it's more importantly, it will actually tell the browser that when we retrieve this file, actually the server will do that for us. So the server will look into this project file and it will retrieve that file from the local scope, I mean from the local machine. And then if I add UTF-8, which is the encoding form, and this will tell the browser, so through this encoding form, this will tell the browser that you will have to read this file as a JSON file. But if we don't include this UTF encoding in UTF encoding byte system, our file will be misinterpreted by our browser, which means our browser won't actually understand what's a JSON file. But if we include this UTF encoding, it will be able to prepare itself to receive a JSON file. So now it's time for us to include the callback function. Now the callback function takes in